Fun.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Many of you know me. My name is Michael Murray. I handle mobility management for the River Valley Regional Commission. And you're also aware that we have been collaborating with the Georgia Department of Transportation and the consulting firm Blue Cypress for the past several months to develop a comprehensive transit development plan that will help to shape the future of transportation, public transportation here in our region. And I want to thank you all for being here, for taking part of this. You know as well as I do that y'all know your communities better than anyone, or as well as anyone. So your input and your ability to gather input and encourage your friends and neighbors and county members and the people in your city to add their additional input to this is absolutely vital to making sure that the plan that's adopted will be one that best meets the needs of our community. So thank you so much for being here. And I do want to have a quick housekeeping note that this meeting is being recorded. So hopefully you are okay with that. And to please keep everything on mute, keep your monitor on mute and use the chat if you need to interject anything. We have a lot of great material that we want to get through, and we want to be respectful of everyone's time and make sure that we're able to end right at 4 o'clock. And with that, again, my name is Michael Murray, and I'm going to pass to Allison Slocum to introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Allison Slocum, Assistant Planning Director of River Valley Regional Commission, and I want to reiterate Michael's thanks for you joining today. Next,
Hi, I'm Camille Bilby. I'm a regional planner, and it's great to have so much participation today.
I'm Tracy Hadaway. I'm the Planning and Government Services Director at River Valley.
And I'm Jim Livingston. I'm Executive Director of River Valley Regional Commission.
And I believe that's everyone from the RVRC. So we'll turn it over to Ms. Sinead Johnson from the Department of Transportation.
All right, thanks, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. As Michael mentioned, I'm Sinead Johnson. I'm a transit planner at GDOT, and I'll just walk you through the agenda for this afternoon. We'll go through welcome and introductions, and you'd actually get to meet the project management team. As Michael mentioned before, we're working with Blue Cypress and AECOM, and they have been providing their expertise and been very instrumental in the development of this plan. We'll also walk through the regional TDP background, how it came about. We'll go through some of the community inputs that we've received thus far. We'll then go ahead and share our draft vision and goals. For those who have not been involved in the process or not been at our meetings before, this is something that we'll get your feedback on. We'll then discuss the transit needs assessment and the alternatives review, and then we'll close out with next steps in the closing. So I'm just going to go ahead and do an introduction from the project management team. Of course, I'm Sinead Johnson, transit planner, and also the project manager lead from GDOT. Amanda?
Hi, everyone. This is Amanda Hatton with Blue Cypress Consulting. I'm managing the project on the consulting side in close coordination with Shanae and Michael and Allison over at the Regional Commission. I'm going to keep us moving, I'll go ahead and introduce the rest of the consultant team that's on today. We have Ansley Belton, who you'll hear a lot from. She's our deputy project manager, moving along a lot of the technical work. And then Joel Carnell, also with Blue Cypress. He is a planner and a GIS analyst, and again, has been doing a lot of the work behind the scenes. We are also joined by Marla Kennerly-Jones at AECOM. She's been keeping an eye on us, making sure we're doing quality work and doing work that's in keeping with the rest of the regional transit development plans that Sinead will talk about here in a moment.
All right, thank you. Now we'd like if everyone else on this call could do a brief introduction. You can either choose to come off mute or just put that information in the chat box. We want to know who you are and what organization you're associated with.
I'm Darrell Holbrook, Webster County Chairman, Board of Commissioners.
Thank you.
I'm Charles Coffey, Chairman, Chattahoochee County Board of Commission.
All right, so we see a few, you're in the chat box here. All right, so as we go along, we're going to proceed. So we want to hear from you all. So we've utilized this polling system. I'm going to ask that everyone visit menti.com. This is where we'll get the feedback. If you do have any additional questions or like to expound on an answer, we ask that you use the raise hand icon, and then we'll ask that you come off mute to expound. But for now, we're going to go ahead and visit menti.com. We do have the code already on the screen. I see some participants thus far. So we're just going to use a few moments, and we also have that information in the chat box. So far we're seeing that most of our representatives, of course, live in the River Valley region. Just going to wait for a few more responses. If you're having any troubles with accessing menti.com, just please let us know. And we still have a few persons joining. All right, so we're going to move on to the next question. Do you work in a county in the River Valley region? Right. All right, thank you for it. Go ahead. And have you used public transit before? And of course, this is going to be very vital when it comes on to knowledge. Does the public have knowledge of public transit? Are they utilizing the resources that are available? Right, so we have a few people who have not used public transit before. And even though most of us do have our vehicles, of course, we can get a public transit day and of course, get that experience with what public transit is like in your region if it's available. All right, Ansley, next slide. And if you have, of course, which transit service have you used? Okay, we have a few responses. All right, thanks for participating. We will have more questions and more in-depth questions as we go along. So I just wanted to provide some background to the regional TDP and how they came about. So in 2020, GDOT released the statewide transit plan, which really identified need for greater coordination, planning, and investment in regional transit services. And really the aim of this was just to ensure that all residents in Georgia have access to public transit. So one recommendation that came out of the statewide transit plan was the development of the regional transit plan. Regional Transit Development Plan. And in this recommendation, we developed what is called a TDP guidebook. It is accessible through our website. And what it does, it provides a framework for creating regional TDPs or other TDPs that you guys may be interested in. We're going to move to the next slide. Okay, so currently, if you look at this map here, GDOT has been working on several regional transit development plans across the state of Georgia. We had our first set of transit development plans completed in 2023. That is with the Georgia Mountains and also the Southwest Georgia region. We currently have 8 regional transit development plans underway. And then, of course, this plan is specifically, targeted to the needs and the opportunities of the River Valley region. Next slide. All right, so I'm now going to hand over to Amanda from Blue Cypress, and of course, she'll discuss more about this project.
Hi. So I'm going to spend just a few more minutes giving y'all a little bit more of an overview of this regional transit development plan process and the key components of it. And then I'll shift us into some community highlights of some of the public and stakeholder input that's gotten us to where we are today before we get into the heart of the meeting, talking about recommendations and some different alternatives for future transit. So on the screen, you're seeing a lot of words. The key thing we want to point out here is that this regional transit development plan is a long-range planning document. There are several key components to it. We are looking out 20 years, but we are focused on what can be done in the next 5 years to move things forward. To build the plan, a key component is public and stakeholder engagement, which I'll highlight some of those key items here in a minute. A key outcome of that is a vision, long-range vision and goals statement that really guide all of the recommendations. Everything we're doing kind of fits back into that. We have also been working on existing conditions report. We finished that up. That's really grounding everything that we're doing and existing transit services, what's going on in your 16 county region. When we look out, how does that help shape where we go in the future? And the last big piece is this alternatives and recommendations report, which is where we are today, is to collect some feedback on some of the key initiatives and recommendations that we're looking at in that report. And that kind of wraps up the whole document. We do want to highlight that all this work, of course, is supported by GDOT, led by GDOT, and as well as federal funding sources. So we have Federal Transit Administration as well as a Federal Highway Administration helping support these initiatives being done, but also as sources for implementing the plan. So at the end of the day, we're really working to create a plan that the River Valley region supports, can embrace, and move forward collaboratively to better serve your community residents and provide transit access to all. On the screen now, you're seeing our project schedule highlighting how those different elements that I just spoke to are overlapping with each other. If you've missed previous meetings, I'll highlight that we did get started in October of 2023. We started out working on existing conditions and doing community and stakeholder engagement. We wrapped up much of that in March. You're seeing on this screen that we had our first round of public and stakeholder input in February and March. I'll give some highlights from that here in a moment. And then also around that, when we were wrapping up that, we started looking at, based on the existing conditions and public input to date, looking at alternatives for future transit investment, service improvements, all the good stuff we'll cover a little later. We are right in the heart of that right now in June, late June. You're seeing the star and the arrow that signifies the launch of our second round of public input that we are looking to leave open through mid-July. Talk a little bit more about that later. And then I want to highlight that we will be finalizing all the documentation for the Regional Transit Development Plan in late summer, early fall, and then have a 30-day public input period beginning in December and going through January. So we're looking at the River Valley Regional Commission considering adoption of the Transit Development Plan in January of next year. You guys have already been looking at this map a handful of times since we started the meeting, but we did want to make sure everyone's on the same page. You know, we are looking at all the 16 counties, inclusive of all your municipalities within River Valley. On the screen, you are seeing a depiction of the transit services that are available within River Valley region. 13 of your 16 counties do provide transit. We do want to point out that when we're talking about public transit, we're referring to transportation that is available to the whole community for any trip type. So you do have other transit service that's tailored for certain populations. So we're specifically focused on public transportation that is accessible to everyone for wherever you need to go. Within River Valley region, you have two different types of transit. You've got fixed route transit in Columbus, Muskogee, served by Metra. And then in the rest of the region, we currently have door-to-door demand response service. And so this is largely what we are talking about, because you are largely a rural region, is looking at demand response, commuter services. How do we tie in? Is there any opportunity for additional fixed route service? And Joel will actually speak a little bit more about that in 5 or 10 minutes. So that's a recap. I'll just check the chat to make sure we don't have any questions, but that's kind of the overview of the Regional Transit Development Plan and where we're headed. As I mentioned earlier, stakeholder and public input is a really key component of making sure that we're tracking with people's experiences and needs. On the screen, you're seeing our 3 different public input windows. We do also have been engaging with a project advisory committee. We've met with them 2 times, so I'll give some highlights from that. And we also have been doing stakeholder interviews. So that kind of supplements these 3 public input periods. Again, we are in the June-July period where we're going to be launching, or we already have launched today as a part of this meeting, a community survey to collect additional public input. And then there will be that public input period when the full document is drafted and available before it is formally considered for adoption. Okay. So I mentioned the project advisory committee. We have set up a project advisory committee at the very beginning of this process. That's what we were getting organized around in late 2023. We did invite representatives from all the transit agencies within the region, as well as representatives from your different jurisdictions. Thank you to the River Valley staff for helping guide us on who to include in that committee, and several of y'all are here today. We did want to point out some highlights from our 2 meetings. So you're seeing highlights from our first meeting, which occurred back in February-March timeframe. Some key things that have really driven our direction is which is something continues to resonate through public input, is medical, employment, and senior services trips are the most needed trip types for public transit and transportation. Affordability is really important, as well as making sure we've got the staff and the vehicles to operate the services, and then navigating the funding to continue to grow or maintain these services is really important. So those were some of the highlights we heard at our first meeting. We just completed our second meeting a couple weeks ago with the same committee. You're seeing some of the highlights here. One thing I want to point out is we did talk about that long-term vision and goals, which we'll bring up here in a minute. And we generally got very positive feedback on that. And so we're excited to bring that out to a public setting in this meeting and our survey to get some additional input. We did ask about extending service hours on the week and weekends, and that was something that seemed to have generally positive reactions. So those are some things we'll ask about today. And then you'll see kind of that ongoing theme of funding support and how can we continue to ensure reliable or additional funding to support where we need to go with transit. And then lastly, the regional collaboration is another loud theme that's been coming out of talking with this focus group of transit providers within the region, as well as leaders from your different jurisdictions. On the next slide, you'll see that we also held some stakeholder interviews. I'm not going to go through all the details on here, but you'll see some of those resonating themes. Again, when we held interviews, we talked with transit providers as leaders from different communities and some partners like your senior centers, Department of Human Services, as well as some of the folks representing your economic development community. Some of the challenges that were raised through these interviews was just the challenge of maintaining staff and training staff to operate vehicles, also having the right supply of vehicles to maintain service. And then again, funding you'll see coming up here again. We did also want to ask, how can this regional process, as well as the Georgia Department of Transportation, support local transit better, as again, we're thinking long-term and short-term moving things forward. And you're seeing some of those same themes, and I'll just flag the last one of how we can transition to more of a regional transit system to receive the benefits of economies of scale, is what I'm trying to say there, and working together. The last thing that I'm going to highlight before we move on to some of the substantive work we've been doing is just survey highlights. I mentioned that we're launching a second community survey today, but we did have a survey carried out earlier this year. Thank you to the River Valley Regional Commission for really working hard to get surveys in the hands of every county in your region. We heard from 15 out of 16 counties, which it was really great. I would say one of the highest results we've been seeing across the state in terms of county or region-wide participation. We did largely hear from population member or community members that are over the age 65. You're seeing 62% of our nearly 300 participants fit into that age group. When we asked people about needs, medical trips were the highest reason why people use transit. People are also felt is really important to provide transit for people that are unable to drive. And you see 75% of respondents highlighted that as a key goal for transit in the region. So you'll see some of this kind of come through and the alternatives we're looking at for transit. The last thing I'll note is well, we'll jump ahead, but I was going to note that there have been some concerns about reliability and then scheduling, just making a service easier and knowing that it's there and making it more efficient from a user by user standpoint to use. This last slide just highlights some of the questions that we asked and some feedback we received. You'll see again that note about why are people using transit? What do people like about transit? They like the door-to-door service. So again, that goes back to that demand response that makes the most sense to serve a lot of the region. And you'll see some conflicting input here where people did say it's easy to schedule a ride. So I think there's just probably some differences across the different transit services, which we'll get into our recommendations report. And people also find that it's safe, which is really important because that's not the case always when you look at transit in different areas. The last thing I'll highlight here is what trips would people like to take if we expanded transit service, and you're seeing the number one is medical trips to outside of a person's jurisdiction or county or community. And then the second one is trips for just the basic needs and services, so groceries, other shopping needs. So all of this good input, again, is shaping how we're looking at transit recommendations, both in the short term and long term, but they really fed into these concise transit vision statement and goals statement, which as we look at the recommendations of the plan, we want everything to feed back into this. And so on the screen, you're seeing in the green box, this long-term vision. Again, we're thinking out 20 years of what we as a region want to provide from a region-wide transit service, and then goals. And I am going to be quiet for a minute so everyone can read what's on the screen. And I'll note some key things to highlight here. We want to connect residents of all 16 counties and reliable, convenient and affordable transit to those key needs, healthcare, employment, and basic needs, while also supporting economic development goals. And then you'll see the goals feed into that vision statement. And all of this has a lot more detail on it. All of the recommendations that we talked through in that report that's coming up should all feeds back into this. And so now we're going to pause, and we'd like to get y'all's feedback on these draft statements. And you'll get back on your phone or your browser to read this again and see. We'd like to kind of just get a temperature in the room of how well this vision statement sits with you when you think about transit service within River Valley.
And Amanda, as the folks are getting onto that website, Mr. Holbrook had a question in the chat box in regards to public input and how we're gaining public input. So we do have a survey that's accessible through the project website, which we'll share in the chat box. We do have the River Valley Regional Commission sharing the surveys on various social media platforms. They can also provide hard copies of the survey that's available to you.
Thank you, Shanae. And if people want more background information, all of that, of course, is on the project webpage at GDOT's website. Shanae just spoke to as well. All right, well, it looks like generally we're getting thumbs up on the vision statement, so really appreciate that feedback. Of course, if you have additional thoughts, you'll have our contact information at the end of the meeting. We're happy to take any additional thoughts there. So on the next slide, we're asking about those 3 goals that expand upon the vision statement. Again, all our recommendations will kind of touch on and address these goals in detail. How are we going to move them forward? But we would like to see from y'all what you think are on a scale of 1 to 5. How would you place these? Would you put them all as 5s? Would you put this as a lower priority, goal 2 as a lower priority, for example? So let's spend a minute reading those and prioritizing them. We'll give you all about 30 more seconds. Okay, and so far we're seeing again that at the number 1, provide dependable, convenient transit connections to essential goods and services, which again resonates with what we heard through the project advisory committee and some of the other input we've collected to date. Just note that the regional transit collaboration seems of a lower priority than the other 2. All right. And this one, I think we can probably buzz through quickly, but if there's any word or phrase that you thought, I was expecting to see that in there, and it comes to mind, you can enter that here. In the interest of time, you can also just put it in the chat function so we can move our meeting along. And I'm gonna, at this point, if there's any questions about the public input or the vision and goals, feel free to unmute or put it in the chat. Otherwise, I'll hand it over to Joel to move us into talking about our alternatives and the recommendations that we're looking at.
Thanks, Amanda. I'll just provide another second for any questions. All right, I'm not seeing anything come through yet, so I'm going to push forward. All right, so as a part of looking at the whole region and getting a baseline for where the transit needs are, we do an analysis of the whole area. And these are the three types of analyses that we do. Transit supported residential densities is looking at basically the populations and what populations can support different types of transit. Your transit propensity and your non-program demand are based on census information, demographic information of populations that are most likely to need transit, and it helps us give an idea of where transit is most needed. So if we move forward to some of the maps we've created, this map again is showing that transit supported residential densities. This is just highlighting again what populations can support different types of transit. And as you can see, predominantly the region is set for demand response. That's the best sort of type of transit that would be supported by the populations. However, you can see in Columbus, Muskogee that that population does support the fixed route system, which they currently run. On the next map, this is an example of the transit propensity and those demographic indicators that we see on the right. We put those all together, and the outcome is this map here that sort of highlights different communities and their need for transit. So we can see there's some areas in Macon, Crisp, South Talbot, and George Quitman that we're identifying as populations that need transit. So we take all this analysis and we feed it through to our alternatives, and some of the highlights that we have are 14 of your 16 counties in the region exceed the state average for elderly populations, and 12 out of the 16 in the region exceed for zero-car households. And again, these are two indicators that we look at to really judge where do people need transit and what populations need transit. Also, again, looking at the whole region, the total unmet transit demand number is 149,907. And this is in 2020, and this is again derived from our understanding of who needs transit. These are not trips that are unserved. These are not necessarily people that are unserved. This is just, looking at the information that we have. We believe that this is the number of trips that, are potentially being unmet based on those populations. So again, we use all this and we to help us come up with alternatives for the transit systems in this region. And those we categorize those alternatives into three buckets. We have the transit expansion, which is more of expanding the area in which transit is served. And we can do this in a myriad of ways that we'll go over in a second. Transit enhancement is what it sounds like. We try to make the service better, more reliable, safer. And then you have your administrative tools and guidance, and this is kind of the behind the scenes, the planning, the marketing, and employee retention. So we'll move on to highlight transit service expansion. So these are the categories for transit service expansion, and we'll kind of go through these each as we run through the slides, and I'll give examples of each one. Again, we'll take a quick look at this, the public transit services map. Amanda did a really good job explaining over this, so I'm not gonna go over it too much, but what you can see is you have your single transit systems in different colors out to the right, and then the regional system is really highlighted by that dark green color. Harris, Stewart, Quitman, Randolph, those counties all together have are supported by one transit system. So as we talked about before, demand response transit is the most appropriate, for this region, just given how spread out the community is and just the population density of the area. And this service is really more of a door-to-door service. in suburban areas where the rider makes a call and can, schedule a service for a set up time. Really works well for medical trips and other like trips of need, groceries, etc. And it's a really good way to ensure that every county has transit. Some of the counties we're looking at this for, because they're the three currently without transit, are Marion, Schley, and Webster. Another area that we explore is expanding the service area. So this would be, for example, we discussed the regional system of the Lower Chattahoochee, and this would be, for example, them expanding to Marion, Schley, Sumter, Webster. Expanding that would be an alternative, as well as 2-county partnerships, which would, for example, the Americas Transit System, helping to cover Schley County, with Schley County, providing some cost share. Finally, just to discuss the bigger regionalization goals, some of the main key things is to help people access resources, employment, healthcare. We know it's really important in this region. Also, it can help make the service more affordable, especially for those smaller counties that might not have the population to support it. Grouping them together can make the economies of scale work. And then finally, reducing those redundancies, having a central location and being able to group all of that together. In this example, we're showing sort of an east-west grouping, and this was sort of based off of the travel trends analysis that we looked at. And now, to finish covering this section, I'm going to pass it off to Ansley.
Thank you, Joel. All right, so the last example of an expansion strategy that we are looking at is serving the commuter needs. So this is specifically focused on how do people get to work. So commuter strategies can take a variety of forms, but essentially what they typically do is provide service on a set route and schedule, and usually they serve a single direction during peak times. So you might be thinking, for instance, if people need to get into Columbus for their jobs, what areas outside of Columbus might feed into and be able to have a morning service to go to Columbus and an afternoon service to go back to their residential county. That's just one example. Of course, I know there's other major employers across the region and in neighboring regions. So we are looking at all of the landscape of where those needs might be. Some of the key employers where we've heard from some of our interviews and work so far are the Kia plant up in Troup County, Feral Gas in Macon County, and Tyson Foods. Given the workforce in these entities, we've heard that there's needs for transit to serve folks, particularly at hours that might not currently be served by existing transit. So across the state, there's various ways transit is being provided to serve these communities. Commute with Enterprise is an emerging option that is really appealing. It is something where a private employer or the local government could partner with Enterprise, the car rental company. They actually have created this service to help make ride sharing and van pools an option and to incentivize workforces to take advantage of that. Some other ways that transit providers can work with employers to put a transit service together are through public-private partnerships. Park and ride lots can help facilitate connections. There's some around the region today, but we're looking at whether there should be more to support better connectivity. And then carpooling and van pooling are also just a part of that transportation demand management. when we're looking comprehensively at how people get around, that's part of this discussion. So you'll see recommendations in all of these areas in our report. But we want to hear from you all about what you think would best meet the needs for the region's workforce.
Ansley, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to note this is a multiple choice question. Or excuse me, select which one you think is the best option for serving the workforce.
And while people are answering, Ansley, I'll just point you to the question in the chat so that you can respond to that when we're done with this question. I don't think.
Yeah, somebody asked, is there communication with the Phoenix City Transit System? They come into Columbus for work trips, but drop off their riders across the state line and not necessarily at the Metro Transit Hub. Yeah, thank you for asking that question. It's on our radar that Phoenix City is coming in, has a transit service that comes into Columbus, and that the joint Columbus-Phoenix City Metropolitan Planning Organization is currently updating their planning documents right now. So it's in our process. We are planning to connect with that team and learn more about opportunities for connections. And I see another person noted the Lee Russell Council of Governments would also be good to coordinate with them. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just add on that we have some follow-up conversations over the next month related to economic development and workforce travel needs. And so these are good suggestions. We'll coordinate with Michael and Allison and others at the Regional Commission about following up as appropriate.
All right, great. Well, thank you. It looks like Park and Ride Lots got the most votes for that. Going back and thinking through all the alternatives we've presented so far, we wanted to hear from you all what you think are the types of strategies that would be most beneficial to least beneficial. So if you could rank in order, we're showing the options are single county programs to serve the counties that don't have transit, regional collaboration, that's that map Joel pointed out that showed the western area and the eastern area being served by two regional systems, commuter services, which I just went over, and then connections between transit services within other regions and over into Alabama, like we were just discussing. Another 30 seconds. Okay. Looks like establishing service in those counties without service today is the highest priority, followed by commuter services. So next I'm going to go through the next two categories at a high level to share with you some of the ideas we're looking at to improve the current services that are in place. So when we talk about what could be improved, we could again look at a variety of things. So I just want to share some of the direction we're headed and definitely put in the chat if there's something else that you think could be improved. But to start us off, I'm going to go through the current schedules, what hours of operations are for the different providers in the region, talk about some of the efficiency and reliability issues we've been hearing about, and then share some best practices about fares. So currently in the region, all of the regional providers are shown here. Most operate their services on a regular Monday to Friday schedule. A couple do Saturday service as well. And for the most part, you'll see that service begins in the morning about 8 a.m. and goes on until 5, in some cases a bit later. For instance, Crisp County's transit is 8 to 8. The Patala Transit System, which is also the Lower Chattahoochee Regional Transportation Authority, that service is 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then Columbus Metro has the earliest start time and latest end time. So we want to hear from you all about what types of improvements to schedule would help benefit the riders in the area. As I was talking through earlier about some of the employers we've heard from, there is a need sometimes for folks to be able to access jobs at third shift hours. So that's something that's not currently being met by those services that include at 5 p.m. Okay. Looks like extending hours later is coming out slightly ahead, but I think expansions in both direction are seen as positive. Okay, I'll move forward. When we're talking about efficiency and reliability, we're thinking about ways to make reserving that service more accessible to people, make it easy, and make sure that the service itself is reliable so that people know when they're going to be picked up, and can get communications easily. So one of the strategies that GDOT is supporting different transit providers with around the state is using their Let's Ride mobile application. This is a new technology that can be used both for reserving your rides as well as paying the fare, and then being able to see different communications. If the provider is running late, for instance, that can be done through the app. We also just want to make sure that there's clear information about transit available on a centralized website. Right now, to learn about all the transit services, sometimes you have to go to various different websites and call different phone numbers. So that'll be something that we look to streamline in our recommendations. Another way that we could streamline what's out there about transit, make it more simple for users, is putting fares that make sense to people and are not different based on where you're using the transit service. For instance, Dooley County Transit is an example where going from different cities or going different mileages has very, I will say, confusing rates as shown here, and it could be simpler for the user if it was, maybe one rate between Dooley County, like internal to Dooley, and then beyond a certain mileage, a different rate per mile. But something like this is a bit complicated. I would say it might deter riders. We've also heard from folks about the affordability of transit, and given that we studied those different demographic factors that Joel looked at, there are a lot of lower income populations within the region, and seniors, for instance, are often on fixed incomes and may not be able to afford using the transit. So we did want to share that some providers around the state are moving toward a fare free program. Catoosa County up north, as well as Athens Clarke County, are two examples of providers that are doing that already. So by offering a zero fare, it really helps increase the ridership and convenience for these groups. So it can be targeted to specific populations. Or you could do discount programs if you're working with different partners. So some nonprofits have been involved in some of these areas, like in Florida, that helped make this a financially viable option. So if this were to be put in place in River Valley, which populations do you think fare-free programs should focus on? So you can select either, and you're also welcome to share other ideas in the chat. Okay, so like the low-income individuals with 4 votes and seniors with 3, so both pretty highly regarded. Next, we wanted to do another poll question just about this set of alternatives I just went over.
Ansley, if
Mhm.
I can interrupt, I want to acknowledge because we got similar feedback at the project advisory committee that in the other area, somebody mentioned disabled persons, and Allison reminded us that we heard veterans as well as a potential folks
Yeah.
that makes sense for a fare-free program.
That's a great point. Thanks, Amanda. All right, so this is another ranking type question. So we wanted to hear just of these 3 types of alternatives I went through, which you think are most important for this region. I'll give it about 30 more seconds. Okay. Both enhancing rider access and improving the experience, and the new technology are coming up to the top. Our last category, which I'm really briefly going to talk to, is administrative strategies that we're looking at. Like Joel said, these are really behind the scenes things, but they're meant to help ensure that the transit services can operate efficiently and smoothly. So things like trainings for drivers, programs that will help retain employees as well, branding campaigns that could help raise awareness about transit. So that Let's Ride mobile application I spoke to also has an accompanying toolkit that Georgia Department of Transportation has worked with some different providers to outfit their vehicles with the Let's Ride logo and help bring awareness to it. And then some other strategies like regional planning and coordination will all be covered in this part of our alternatives and recommendations report. So as we wrap up over the next month with the public input that we're collecting through the survey, we're going to be taking your feedback into consideration as we further evaluate how these alternatives could work in the region, what should be most prioritized. We're also going to be putting cost estimates with each of these recommendations, as well as determining the proper time frame, because this is a 20-year plan. So some alternatives which move into the recommendations, some will be prioritized for the next 5 years, and then some could be over the 20-year period. No, some could take longer to implement. So that's where we're going with getting to our recommendations stage, and I'll pass it over to Amanda to talk more about our next steps.
All right. So we've been talking about this survey, and Shanae, you were great at dropping, I think you dropped in the chat earlier, the link to the website. Everyone can access the survey at that link and get background information. So if someone wants to learn more about the project or see the recording from this meeting, we always encourage getting a little background information before participating in the survey. But that online input period, we are currently planning to close that on July 15th. So encourage folks to participate as soon as possible. As we spoke about earlier, Michael and team are helping distribute surveys out throughout the region. We are happy to help support that if you've got a group or a place you'd like to have those put in addition to the online link. We will be looking to post that final draft of the regional transit development plan for public review by the first week of December. We are slated to be on the agenda at the River Valley Regional Commission Council meeting on December 11th to kind of preview what's in the plan, the key recommendations, and kind of remind everyone that there's about a month for the community members and leaders to take a look at it and provide feedback. And then we'll look for adoption in January. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we really are focused on developing a plan that is well supported by the region and implementable. And so really looking at what are the key things to move forward coming out of this once we're adopted in January. I know Georgia Department of Transportation is excited to see these forward to the next steps. And perhaps that's my segue over to Shanae, if you want to make any final remarks, and then Michael or Allison before we close out.
All right, thanks, Amanda. So we'd like to thank you all for your feedback today. And of course, in developing this transit plan, feedback is vital. So I have linked the website information if you'd like to track the progress of this study here. We also have an email inbox set up. It's below here at regionaltdp@dot.ga.gov. If you do have any questions in regards to this transit development plan for the River Valley region, we ask that you send us an email. And of course, we have the project contacts. Thank you all so much. Not sure if anyone else has any points. If not, Michael, Allison. All right, in respect of time, we will close out. Thank you all. If no one has any questions.
I'm sorry, my computer seems to have frozen, but I just wanted to, if you can hear me, I wanted to reiterate Ms. Johnson's thanks for being here and for being part of this. Y'all are doing an awesome thing, and I believe that this transit development plan can really have a huge positive impact on our community. If you have any questions about getting out materials to the people in your county or your city, you can email me. My email address is mmurray@rivervalleyrc.org. You can also find it on our website, or you can get in touch with us through Facebook. I'll get it however you reach out to us. So I hope to hear from many of you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.